Hello again, and welcome to part 2 of the digital photography and Photoshop class. So tonight we'll be getting into HDR photography and things like outdoor, well, we've done outdoor photography, nighttime photography, making a person look younger, older, fatter, thinner in Photoshop, that as well. Other things, restoring old photos, that's another thing that could be helpful. So all of that we'll try to cover tonight. So I'll start off with HDR photography. As you can see here, I have several links opened up already to discuss that topic. This is, well, as you can see, entitled The Top 10 Best HDR Software Review 2012. And he has 10 listed here. And you're welcome to look through this whole article. It's in you should have it in your outline of the course. Excuse me. However, he does not cover some of the programs that a lot of people like to use. One of them is HDR Effects, spelled E-F-E-X. And I would recommend that one. In fact, even I was looking in the comments, I like to look in the comments of some of these types of articles, online articles. And one of the first ones mentions, ever try HDR FX Pro? Wondering if you didn't, or it didn't make your list. I've been debating between that and Photo Matrix Pro, but I am leaning towards the first. I think I'm going to clear my throat here before I continue on. Okay, as I was about to say, so yeah, HDR FX Pro, that is one I've heard some good feedback on as well. I haven't tried it yet, I haven't purchased it. I noticed he also mentioned, this is the author of this particular article, and he says, this is the 2010 list. I have the 2011 list coming out, which has HDR FX listed. And he also says there seems to be a new version out, so it might have addressed issues that frustrated me, so I will redo the review when I have some time. And apparently he hasn't redone the review, or I don't know, this says 2012 now, and there's no HDR FX, so I don't know what the deal is with that. But anyway, I was also going to mention, oh, I can't remember now. Well, maybe that will come back to me. So what I was going to do with this article, a few things, what I already did, but sorry, it seems like I'm having more issues with my voice tonight, but I'll try to continue on. So when you're doing HDR photography, often you will take multiple photos and take the overexposed, underexposed, and one that is right about on even exposure, what they're calling it here. And then you'll merge them together in some HDR software. They don't necessarily have to be over and underexposed, and I'll show you that in just a minute. But the purpose of using under, over, and evenly exposed images, it's especially apparent in an image such as this, where you have light areas and dark areas. Of course, in the evenly exposed, or one that's right on, notice there's not as much information in the sky, there's not as much hue, saturation, it's kind of washed out, and it looks a lot better in this one, but of course the foreground is underexposed, and you don't get the information that you're getting in this image as far as the foreground is concerned. So high definition, high dynamic range, it allows you to get all the information in your lights and your dark areas and hopefully makes it closer to what you saw in person. I did think it was interesting his results. He went through each of these specific programs and he posted his results and what he was able to do. Keep in mind each person, might have different results just depending on how they made it look. You can, it's kind of easy to do a bad job with HDR photography if you get carried away, and I've seen a fair amount of that posted online. Again, it's to some extent it's really subjective. But anyway, I'm just going through his different results here, so we can kind of glance at them. This one is kind of what I would call an example of bad HDR photography as far as the results. It's just overdone. It looks kind of dramatic, and it's more of what you could term surreal look. But I think it's, unless you're going for some, I guess very surreal look, it doesn't look at least realistic to me. And I doubt it looked quite like that when they were seeing it in person. The foreground being so light in comparison to the sunset. Here's another one I think is more natural looking. Most of the others look more natural looking. Color maybe is a little too orange and too saturated up there, I would say, but it's better than this, I think. Color-wise, this one might be a little bit better. I like the clouds on this one better, maybe, but anyway. So I'm going to go through some examples that I've done, but let's see anything here. Let's look at the outline for a second. Before we get to the examples, I wanted to show you a few more things. So this link is also in your outline. I liked this article, or he charges for it $9.97, but if you want to look at this, you're welcome to. But essentially, I purchased it in the past, but he goes through, as it says here, some common mistakes in HDR photography. If you have a good eye, you might be able to understand already without looking at this what the common mistakes are. One of them I will mention is that you never should HDR faces or close-up portraits of people. It makes them look weird. Just to there's no way around it. That shouldn't ever be done. HDR photography is good for outdoor photography and scenic photography, that type of thing, cityscapes even, since it brings out the light areas and dark areas as we've already talked about. I wanted to show a few more examples, well, one more example of what I would consider overdone HDR photography. So here we have something which can commonly be done with HDR photography. It tends to darken the sky sometimes and bring out the clouds, but this is so dramatic that again, he's going for the surrealistic look, you might say. But I don't know, maybe someone might like it, but I think it's just overdone, and it looks very fakey to me. You can see in the foreground how light this is, and then how dark it is up in the sky. It just seems, I've never seen a sky that looks quite like that, and I doubt I ever will. It doesn't look natural. And anyway, sometimes you can get away with a somewhat more surrealistic look, but I think this is stretching it. Okay, so that's all as far as the links that relate to HDR photography. We'll go back to there later. Okay, before I get into Photoshop, I wanted to go to Photomatis. So that's what I have and I tend to use for HDR photography. So here's a set of images that I wanted to use for the demonstration. I've actually HDR'd it in the past, and I know it turned out pretty well, so that's one reason I chose it. Let me make this larger. So one thing you might notice, I don't have any that are underexposed, or very underexposed, at least they aren't that dark. These three are about the same, they are the same exposure, and then I do have one that is overexposed. But it turned out okay, and so I thought I would show you this. Notice the clouds are a little bit different in each of these images. The clouds were moving fairly quickly overhead, and that can be a problem sometimes. Sometimes, you know, when you merge the photos together, it will overlay the clouds and it might look funny in one area. But it turned out okay in this case. I think maybe because there's clouds blanketing the sky for the most part, and they're similar at least. So what you would do, at least if you're using Photomax, Photomax is fairly inexpensive. I think, if I remember right, it's like $99 or something like that. But it's works okay. I have heard that this is what I forgot to say earlier. I was trying to remember. I heard the latest version of Photomax isn't as good. At least some people don't like it as much as an earlier version of it. Kind of the opposite of what the guy was saying in the article about HDR FX Pro. He said the latest version he didn't like. So that's actually no, an earlier version he didn't like. So anyway, that's just something to think about. I think I have probably the latest version, and I have noticed that Photomax is kind of difficult to use, and it's easy to get wrong. But you know, it can be done. I don't really like Adobe Photoshop's HDR photography feature. I'll show you where it is later on, but I don't really like the results I usually get from it. Okay, so I'll open all these at the same time. What I would do, you know, on my computer, I just scroll over all of them. I right-click on my mouse, excuse me, and just open with Photomax Pro. I already have Photomax open, and we'll merge for HDR processing. So I'll just keep that selected, and it already has the photos there, so that's okay. I don't need to browse for other photos, and we'll click OK. I don't want to show the intermediary 32-bit HDR image. And it's going to pop up a message telling me, hey, some of these images look like they're exposed the same amount. Do you please give me more information about bracketing these as far as their exposure? And it seems to be frozen up. And what I'm going to tell it is, again, okay, there it is. Yeah, like it said, exposure information is missing, or one or more of the images have the same exposure settings. And it's right, so it has guessed, it usually does a pretty good job of guessing what the exposure is. So these are all the same, apparently pretty close to it, and then this one is overexposed. You could specify if I wanted to bracketing this further apart. In other words, you know, the exposure difference between the images are further apart or closer together. So keep that in mind, but I'm just going to have it at 1, and click OK, and it's going to crunch on this for a while, so I'll click pause for your benefit. But some of the features, pre-processing options, aligning source images, sometimes you might take one photo after the other and maybe something moved, or maybe I don't know, you had a tripod and you bumped it, or didn't have everything screwed down tightly. So it's usually good to select align source images. Crop aligned images, that's a good thing as well. Sometimes, you know, when you realign them, if they were off, you might have staggered areas that, you know, need to be cropped, and so you'd have to do that manually if you didn't click here. And it's going to align them by matching features in the image and include perspective correction. That's probably more important if you have, well, no, I think I'll just do that. I probably don't have to have that selected. There's not much correction I don't think it needs to do, but okay, reduce noise on normal exposure and underexposed. You can do whatever you would like on that. It takes more time. Reduce chromatic aberrations, that's helpful. You remember we were doing that in Photoshop when we were using the raw files. So we'll go ahead and click that. It's not a big thing if you have, you know, small prints. It's just noticeable if you're blowing up your image more. White balance, auto's fine. And I have my camera set to actually Adobe RGB because, you know, I'm not used to processing it directly going right into Adobe Photoshop, which uses Adobe RGB. So I'm going to keep Adobe RGB because that's what the camera's set to. Initially it was, by default, it was sRGB, and I got rid of that and switched it, you know, just in the settings within the camera. So, okay, Adobe RGB, and pre-process. And it will sit there for a while and convert it. It takes a little while, like I said, so we'll hit pause at this point. Okay, so I wanted to show, just before we get into photomatics again, here's a photo I thought was a better example of, this is a good example of HDR photography in my mind. At least one that is still a little bit, you know, dramatic. Well, it is dramatic and maybe somewhat surrealistic, but it, I think they pull off better than some of the other one I showed you earlier. This is just my favorites in my Flickr account. This is what I finally got. Just wanted to show you the results I got on this image after I HDR'd it. If I remember right, I'm not sure if I did this or not, but one thing I like to do is to take you know, the evenly exposed image and tweak it in Photoshop, and then I'll take the Photomatics or, you know, HDR image, and I'll take the two and combine them in two different layers and adjust the opacity, and maybe I'll pick and choose certain areas which I like, and I'll use a mask to kind of, in a sense, erase the parts that you know, sort of invisible. So I kind of get a mixture of both images that way. It's maybe the best parts of each image. Because sometimes I think the photomatics effect is too dramatic and surrealistic, you know, or just looks a little, you know, off. And so I like using it to just add a little extra something to the Photoshop ones, the Photoshop images that I've brought in, the raw ones. So that's a thing, some technique you might try. I don't know if I've heard of anybody else doing that. Maybe they do, but I've just kind of made it up on my own. But it seems to work fine. Okay, so here's what we have so far. It merged the images together, and it came up with this. Still, I have some work to do, obviously. These are some presets down here, which I usually just click off of. Right now, it's set to whatever the previous image was in here. These are the settings, and it doesn't quite work for this one. I have some other presets that I've created over time and saved. You can see down here. You would just, if I like these settings, I could go right here where you see Save Settings, and I could save these and they would become a new preset. I'm going to run through these different presets just to see, out of curiosity, if any of them work. So it's refreshing, you could see it there. That one's pretty dark. I think it's a little bit nicer than the previous one, which looked washed out, but it's kind of dark. I'm going to pause for a minute. Okay, I'm back. Alright, this one is more washed out again. We'll try mountain scene number 3. Dark again, more saturation I think. 4.5. Okay, washed out again, 4. It's kind of unsaturated one, I think. Okay, and that one's kind of less warm. Thinking the one maybe I like the most, at least in these presets, is Mountain Scene 1, so I think I'll start with that and then go from there. No, that's not the one. Maybe it was in Mountain Scene 2. And you can see up here it says refreshing in green. No, I guess I've forgotten which one it was. Okay, I think it was that one. I wanted to make this a little bit warmer. And that's a good start. It's too dark. But, so one of the, well, okay. It looks like I used the kind of preset lighting adjustment for natural right there. I usually don't use those, but apparently it worked fine on this one. If you unclick this right there, then it's thinking about it. Okay, then you have your manual lighting adjustment right here. And you notice if I hover right over that slider down on the bottom, right down here in this box, some text will appear, and it kind of tells me what this is for, and that's helpful for anyone who's just starting out. So lighting adjustments affects the overall look, controlling the extent to which the image looks natural or surreal. Let's go to another one here really quick before we continue. Luminosity is the offending slider or setting that I think results maybe in more of the bizarre, surrealistic looking HDR photography results. So if I were to slide it way over to the left, it becomes more surrealistic. If this is the setting I'm thinking. Maybe not. Hold on. Let's see. To the right, it's going to be more natural. No, it's not right. It's not the right setting. Let me go down here. I thought it was lighting adjustments. About the description. Let's go down here. Here's the advanced options. You can hide those. By default, you might not even see any of this. Oh, I wanted to. Let's see. Here we go. It is lighting adjustments. I don't know. Maybe I was hovering over the wrong thing. Or I don't know. I'll just read this. Lighting adjustment affects the overall look, controlling the extent to which the image looks natural or surreal. Move the slider to the right to make the image look more natural, and to the left to make it look more painterly or surreal. Okay. So let's move it to the left just to see how it looks when it's more surreal. And yeah, it sometimes tends to brighten the dark areas more and darken the light areas almost too much. It does make it more dramatic. I could leave it this way, and let's bring it all the way to the other side, and that's supposed to be the more natural way, and how it would have looked more out of the camera to some extent. Okay, it's completely different. I think maybe a happy medium between those two would probably be best. maybe let's just start within the center at negative 0.6, which means it's slightly on the surreal side. Okay, that's okay. I'm gonna try the lighting effects mode like I had on that preset, so I just checked right there. And natural. Natural plus is, well, as you imagine, it's supposed to look more natural. Well, it's really dark. Then you have medium and surreal plus. Surreal plus will probably really be out there, kind of odd looking. Yeah. There we go. There's a poster example for a bad HDR job. Sometimes you'll get something where there'll be kind of a glowing effect on the skyline or around your trees. Not so much on this one, but a little bit. And so that's what not to do here. Let's look at surreal quickly. So there's just straight surreal. Then we'll go over to natural again. I'll just leave it at that for now. Okay. Then I wanted to lighten this up, so let's try bumping up the luminosity. And white point, we can increase that, lighten it some. More. I could also reduce the black point to some extent. That's a little maybe too dramatic, I don't know, it's just, again, depends on what you're trying to do. But the black point is pretty far up there, so that is probably the main thing that's darkening it, I'm guessing. Well, maybe a little more than that. Still want it to be, somewhat dramatic. You could get rid of almost all the dark areas if you wanted to, but it would look flat and unnatural. Alright. Temperature, it's slightly on the warm side. You can see here, well, it is on the warm side. MicroSmoothing, if I were to move in, or zoom in, sorry, maybe, let's go to the sky, because that's an area that you can see the MicroSmoothing better. If I click in space, you can see a close-up of the sky, and you do see kind of some dots and everything going on. So MicroSmoothing will get rid of some of that at times. It depends on each photo, is different though. Let's try to bump it all the way up just to show. I usually try to keep my MicroSmoothing down as low as possible. You can see over here it makes it look like it's a lower resolution image, and it looks like it didn't even affect the sky really in this instance, so it's not going to be a good tool for that. I guess I can, if I want to, I could fix that in Photoshop pretty easily. Oh, I haven't enough time to throw tonight. Okay, so I'm going to, I think I'll just get rid of, the MicroSmoothing. But I just wanted to show you, it can be useful for, it also what it does, it kind of, well, let's read the description here, tell you better than I can describe it better. It smooths out the enhancement of small details, which has the effect of reducing the noise in the sky, for instance, which tends to give a cleaner look to the result. So it will look less, it'll look smoother as far as darks and lights and details. And you notice it kind of lightened it as well. But let's zoom out again. I didn't care for the overall look. Maybe I could just add a little bit. Look at that. Yeah, I think it's just too much out. Maybe just a hair, slight amount. Okay, then you have saturation highlights where you can target the saturation in the highlight areas. Say, for instance, I wanted these areas, the mountain to be more saturated, maybe more yellow. It will do that without adjusting the dark areas or the midtones. I have both of them way up there. So I might want to reduce some of the saturation, but I'll leave it for now. I just want to go through all of these settings and kind of run through what they do. Some of them you'll use less. I don't ever really use shadows clipping. It's not necessarily usually shadow smoothing. Shadow clipping. The value of a shadow clipping sets how much the shadow range is clipped. This control may be used to cut out noise in the dark areas of a photo taken in a low light situation. So, I guess if I took the night sky, that can have a lot of hot spots or noise, especially if I had it at 1500 or 1600 ISO or higher, 6400. So I guess you would use it in that situation. I haven't had to use it yet for landscape photography. Strength. Oh, there's another thing I maybe should start at the beginning. You could use the tone compressor method. I never use that though, but I'm using tone mapping also up here instead of exposure fusion. Those are the two that I normally use. You're free to experiment if you get photomatics with the other methods. Okay, at this point I'm going to cut the video. It's probably just over 30 minutes, and then I'll start up again right away, but it will be a separate video.